So by far, the biggest question I got asked this last beta was, should I play on World Tier 1 or should I play on World Tier 2? Now, most of those people were asking about Ashava specifically, but I want to expand this discussion and showcase my testing that I have in the game from the previous beta, showcasing the health difference because it's actually hidden, as well as the minute advantages for playing on World Tier 2, but oftentimes the fact that World Tier 2 is the biggest mistake in the game. So let's first consider what we get for playing on World Tier 2. The first thing is that the monsters are more difficult. Now, what does more difficult mean? Well, they do more damage, and it looks to be that they actually have a higher health pool, and I'll show my proof in this video. But you also get 20% more experience and 15% more gold. Now, I will note the gold basically does not matter at all. Most of the gold you're going to acquire in the game is by selling items, not by looting it off of monsters. The 20% experience gain for monsters actually can be pretty massive, and that is one of the only advantages, if not the only advantage, that World Tier 2 gives you, besides just having a more competitive experience. So with that being the case, we need to figure out, okay, at what point should I be running World Tier 2? And let's dive into that. So as you can see here, I have two screenshots from the most recent beta. On the left-hand side, I am hitting with my rogue with the puncture skill, which has 3 hits. I'm hitting the exact same enemy. And on the right hand, I'm hitting with the exact same skill as the rogue. And you can see here the world tiers are shown on screen. The right hand side is World Tier 1 and the left hand side is World Tier 2. Now, if we're just going to go ahead and take these numbers, because they are different, I got variable numbers. We have 7 plus 10 plus 7, and then on the right hand side we have 8 plus 7 plus 12. Pardon my poor writing. Now, if we add these together, we are going to get 27 on the right hand side, and on the left hand side we are going to get, oops, that's another plus sign, just ignore that. We're going to get 24. So these are slightly different numbers, which kind of makes sense, right? We have a lower health pool total over here on the right hand side and a higher health pool total remaining on the left hand side. However, if I were to zoom in for you guys, we can actually kind of see the HP difference. Now, this is not perfect by any means. This is just my testing that I was able to do. And you can see here, this probably is around, let's say 55% to like 60% of the health bar remaining. And then on the left hand side, you're around anywhere from like 65 to potentially 70% HP remaining. And those seem pretty reasonable estimations in my opinion. Again, this is roughly the middle point of the bar, and this is roughly the midpoint of the bar over here. And so that means that we have a decent chunk of HP higher remaining on the left-hand side, which is World Tier 2. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. If I have 27 points of damage in World Tier 1 and 24 points of damage in World Tier 2, we can actually reverse engineer the health bars if we assume the remaining HP, which we can roughly do due to my absolutely amazing paint drawing here. So on the right hand side, let's assume we have the lower amount that I estimated, 55%, and on the left hand side, we have the 65% of HP remaining. If we plug that into a calculator to reverse engineer this, which we can do ourselves, we just multiply by 100, divide by the remaining percent, but you know, I mean, everything can be calculated online. So we have 27% is 45%, because that's the amount of damage that we did to the right hand side bar, is what number? 60. So that is the total amount of HP on this wolf. And then if we plug in the left-hand side, 24 is 35, because 100 minus 65, which is this number right here, equals 68.5. So it seems that the monsters in World Tier 2 have a 10 to 20% HP boost. And I'm giving a big range there because obviously these drawings are not perfect. The damage calculations potentially could not be perfect in terms of maybe it's rounding up, maybe it's rounding down, whatever. I'm not quite sure. But there does seem to be a pretty lookable, or I guess you could say reasonable difference that you can actually see inside the game. So let's consider a few things. If the HP increases anywhere from 10 to 15%, which is kind of what we're estimating here, if it's a 20% HP increase, then there would be literally no reason, because it would take you fat longer, the same amount of time to kill something in the later tiers, assuming you can't just one-shot everything, right? Because if you could one-shot the later world tiers, then guess what? You get higher XP for no downtime, no time loss. But just a couple of examples here, or an example here to show you all. Let's say we have a base HP monster of 100 versus 110 in World Tier 2, because it's going to go up by 10%. We have a 20% increase, which means we're getting 10 XP per kill in World Tier 1 or 12 XP per kill in World Tier 2. We have 100 damage per second, which means that we're killing that monster in 1 versus 1.1 seconds. And that means that we're getting 10 versus 10.9 experience per second. So the experience is actually better in World Tier 2. And that is assuming that you're keeping the same DPS. However, there's a huge caveat to this, and that is the monsters hit harder. If the monsters hit harder and later world tiers, which this will change drastically because there's going to be like other game modes, so there's going to be a reason to run World Tier 2 or World Tier 3. But in World Tier 2, the monsters hit harder. And so if that means that you're losing DPS because, I don't know, you have to dodge a skill, you can't just face tank it, which you can do in World Tier 1, you might have a minor DPS loss, and that means that you're actually not able to keep up the exact same DPS, and that means that the XP is going to get even worse. Pardon my paint writing once again, but as I mentioned, let's say you drop 10% DPS. Let's say you drop just a little bit of DPS. Well, now you're taking that time that you initially had, that 110 HP, you're dividing that by 90 damage per second, which gives you a certain second number, I believe is 1.2 seconds to kill that monster. And now your XP per second is 9.8, which means you're getting less XP than you would have in the World Tier 1, despite getting additional XP for the monster kill. Which means that if you're losing roughly, assuming you can kill the monsters in about roughly the same time, again, it really depends on your DPS, because if you're able to one-shot World Tier 2, then this changes drastically and you should just run World Tier 2. But assuming you can't one-shot World Tier 2, which you most likely will not when you're running through it at all, because elites exist, bosses exist, etc. If you're losing 10% of your DPS or a little bit less, then it's not worth it to run World Tier 2. So basically, what does this mean? So we've already established the only two things you get from going on World Tier 2 is additional gold and additional experience. Now, additional gold follows the same logic as additional experience, because again, we have to kill the monster to get the gold, and that means that, hey, when you're killing monsters, if it takes a little bit longer, guess what? You're not going to get as much gold as you think you are. The other thing that we didn't mention is loot. If you're on World Tier 2, does not matter how efficient you are. If you have the same DPS that you do on World Tier 1 and you're not one-shotting things, meaning that you're overhitting your DPS in World Tier 1, you're going to get less loot. So always less loot, which is a big thing to consider. As for XP, the only time when World Tier 2 is worth it is if you're not taking any DPS loss from World Tier 2. And this is very, very unlikely, considering the fact that you can ignore mechanics in World Tier 1 by potion spamming. You cannot do that in World Tier 2, generally. At the same time, most of your experience is going to come from campaign quests, side quests, maybe dungeon completion, etc. And all those things aren't actually increased by World Tier 2. So again, the only time you should be playing World Tier 2 is if you can one-shot World Tier 1, and that means also one-shot World Tier 2, when farming monsters, which did happen to me in the beta. As I showed in my farming spot, I was actually able to one-shot monsters in World Tier 2, which means that it's better for me to farm World Tier 2. Or if you're able to take 0 DPS loss going from World Tier 1 to World Tier 2 and just be able to ignore all the mechanics, which is possible, but it's very, very rare. So hopefully that helps. That is something that I have definitely dove a lot deeper, because this last beta, we all talked about going to World Tier 1 for Ashava, and then I just started to stay on World Tier 1 and noticed a little bit of HP difference and all that type of stuff. Because up until this point, I actually didn't really play on World Tier 1 at all, basically, because, well, it only makes sense to play on World Tier 2. And in fact, I got baited by it earlier on as well. And so I wanted to do some math and show some screenshots that I took from the beta that I was doing a little bit of research on. So hopefully this helps some of you. If it did, leave a like on the video, sub to the channel, guys. I'll have more content coming about some of the launch advice, launch guides, launch builds, all the type of stuff that you want to know. Thanks for watching. See you all tomorrow.